Hello, and welcome to the first full episode of the podcast Papa Tom's Take. In the short tease that you might have seen earlier, I make a distinction between my take and offering you the truth, as so many other podcasts and media sources promise the truth. My take is my understanding from watching speeches, watching interviews, watching hearings, and reading firsthand primary sources when possible. I understand and acknowledge that sometimes that's not possible. For example, I have a hard copy of Jack Smith's report coming in the mail. And if I decide to do a podcast on that report, it will be after I've read the whole report. So I've looked at the primary source. So again, I'm giving you my take, my understanding of current events. And also, as I said earlier, looking back to some of the experiences I've had professionally, and also some interesting topics I have. So it's going to be a variety of different kinds of episodes. This particular episode, as the title indicates, looks forward to the Trump administration. But before that, I want to take a quick look backwards. I understand, it's very clear to me that politicians will promise things that they know they can't deliver, and that happens all the time on both sides. And I'm sure if Harris had won the election, there'd be some podcaster sitting somewhere questioning the things that she promised. So, having said that, Donald Trump makes a whole array of very specific promises. And I want to look back to the last Trump administration. He made it very clear during the campaign, and actually during his presidency, that he was planning to build a border wall on the border with Mexico, and that Mexico would pay. Just a few statistics. The border with Mexico is approximately 1,950 miles long. Currently, there's approximately 452 miles of what is determined called wall. Now, some of those things are really barriers that are simply fences with barbed wire and so forth. And during the Trump administration, it's clear that he added 80 additional miles of new wall. Now, I will admit that finding statistics on this particular topic is somewhat difficult. So these are the best statistics that I could come up with. And lastly, obviously, Mexico did not send a check for the cost of those 80 miles. I should say that while it's 80 miles of new wall, there were improvements done to that 452 miles of existing barrier. Congress didn't fund building of a wall. So then President Trump used his emergency powers to divert funds from various departments, including the Department of Defense. So that's looking back. One of his big hallmark promises for the 2016 campaign, he did not keep. Now, I'm just going to cherry pick some of the promises that he's made. I'm not going to cover every single thing, but just some of the big hitters. In some of these, I won't have a hope, fear, prediction, and preparation, but I'll give you my take. One of the clear promises that Trump made was that during the campaign was that he would lower food prices. Now, if you follow the news and interviews, you know that once he was elected, he backed off of that claim that he would lower food prices. So my hope is that he does. My fear is that because of other things that we'll talk about in a few minutes, for example, tariffs, food prices will in fact go up. And that really is my prediction, that maybe not because of tariffs, but food prices during his 4 years will increase. Now, whether they'll increase at the rate that they did during the Biden administration, I have no, I do have kind of a crystal ball. I have an 8 ball here. I have no way of really knowing that. But his claim of lowering food prices, I think, is totally out of the picture. That won't happen. Similarly, he promised to lower gasoline prices. Now, there are a lot of factors that go into gasoline prices, and most of them are outside the power domain of a president of the United States. Just a couple quick statistics. The U.S., many people aren't aware of this. I certainly wasn't until I looked it up. The U.S. recently became the #1 petroleum oil production country in the world, with a 13.3 million barrels a day in December of 2023. That's the most recent statistic that I could find. So the Biden administration is already producing more than any other country. So I wondered how many barrels would have to be produced, for example, for the country to not import any oil. And that is approximately 20 million barrels a day. So a little bit of math, somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 million barrels a day. Additional production would make us energy independent from the standpoint of petroleum, which conceivably could result in a lowering of price, because if your production is all in the United States, the president obviously has some additional power in those directions. Okay, so lowering fuel prices, my hope is it does happen. My prediction is that maybe the rate of increase will decrease, but I think, again, prices will go up. With Trump's mantra of drill baby, I'm predicting that he will be able to increase production maybe up to the 20 million barrels a day. But remember, that's an increase from 13 that occurred during the Biden administration. It's not an increase from like 10 or 8 or any other lower number. So the number was already high. And there were also substantial leases that the Biden administration had allowed that were still to be tapped. So it could very well, I don't know this is my opinion, could very well be that there's a lag time, that actions that Biden took won't be result in additional production for several months or maybe even years. I don't know that. Which brings us from that discussion to tariffs. Trump has made a big deal out of tariffs, and he's really been all over the place. His amount of tariffs against China, for example, has varied from 20% to 100%. Currently, depending upon the product, tariffs in China, tariffs to Chinese goods are between 7%, and there are some that are at 20%. So what actually the details of what he might do certainly is not clear. Now, here's my view. If Trump uses it as a bargaining tool to get better trade agreements, I'm okay with that. If he simply flexes his muscles and places tariffs on all over the place, China, Mexico, Canada, it doesn't take an economist to understand that that's going to result in additional prices for the consumer in the United States. The Chinese producers are not going to eat that tariff. The Chinese government's not going to eat the tariff. The Chinese producers aren't going to eat the tariffs. The U.S. distributors are not going to eat the tariff. So whether 100% of the tariff gets passed to the consumer, that's not clear. And that probably varies with product. But there's no doubt, just common sense, that because of all these steps along the way aren't going to eat the tariff, that it's the consumer at the end. Eventually, tariffs might result in additional production in the U.S. So, for example, if China is producing a product for much less, the tariffs make it more expensive. Now a U.S. company can compete with that more expensive value. It might, in the long run, create business and employment opportunities for the consumer. But I don't believe that that's going to be in the near future. So, quick prediction: I think that he's going to really back off of this tariff business and maybe do a token kind of tariffs. If he doesn't, then my prediction is that it will result in significant increases in cost to the U.S. consumer. And that kind of bleeds into the next topic of taxes and the deficit. Several of Trump's proposals at one end reduces the taxes, the tax relief. For example, his notion of no taxes on Social Security and no taxes on tips and no taxes on overtime, that will result in a loss of revenue from the U.S. Government. So, if that's all that happens, then automatically the deficit has to increase. Just again to give a few numbers, the revenue taken in tax-wise for the United States government in 2024 was $4.92 trillion, and the expenditures were $7.5 trillion. So the Biden administration was running a deficit. In fact, the 4 years of the Biden administration will result probably in a deficit of $8.2 trillion. Trump's first administration was $7 trillion. So if all you're going to do is reduce the taxes, you're going to reduce the revenue. So the deficit has to go up. Now, tariffs could offset that. But again, tariffs are money that comes into the government, but the individual consumer are the ones that are really paying for it. So in a way, it's a hidden tax. Which brings me to the Department of Government Efficiency. Not long ago on Facebook, let me start a different place. I, like a lot of people, make the assumption that the federal government, partly because its size, is inefficient. And that assumption is probably true. But my direct experience with the federal government doesn't tell me that. My Social Security check comes on time. My Medicare payments happen in a timely fashion. My IRS tax refund gets directly to my bank account within a few days of when the filing takes place. So I don't have real evidence of inefficiency. Again, I'm not questioning the assumption. I'm just saying I don't have any evidence. So on Facebook not long ago, I posted that and asked for people to give examples. No one responded. So let's assume, though, that the government is inefficient. So Trump has created this not a government agency at all, and appointed 2 billionaires, who do business with the U.S. government to look for places where government could be cut, including regulations. Now, if you believe that these 2 billionaires are really going to keep a regulation that hampers their private efforts, I think you're whistling in the wind. I don't think, given the fact that they in fact try to influence government in other ways, I don't think that they're going to be altruistic enough to keep regulations that make it difficult for them. This operation of reducing increasing the efficiency of the federal government. I don't know what the goal is. If the goal is to balance the budget, that means that this organization needs to find and recommend cuts that would be in the order of $2 trillion a year. And you might be able to find some of those, but once you cut a program, then the next year that won't help you because you've already cut it. So it's not clear to me what the final objective is, and it's not clear to me how they're going about the process, and it's not clear to me who's paying for the staff that they're assembling. Elon Musk indicated he was interested in a staff of 100 people by inauguration day. Now, these aren't people that are sweeping the floors and emptying the baskets. These are highly skilled professional people. So I've never seen anything about the budget for this operation or who's footing the bill for it. I'm surprised that no one has posed that question. At least I haven't found it. If I'm wrong, I'd love to hear about it. Which brings me to the relationship of President-elect Trump and Elon Musk. I'm concerned about the amount of power that's. I'm concerned about the influence that money appears to be making. Bernie Sanders warned of an oligarchy since the 1990s. And perhaps we're already there. I don't know the answer to that. Perhaps there are people on both sides of the political aisle that are very rich and very powerful and pulling the strings, and everything else has been a charade. I don't know that. But I am concerned about Musk. I want to digress for a second. Let's assume that Musk has $200 billion of cash stashed somewhere, not in a bank, gathering interest, not invested. To give you an idea of what $200 billion is, and his worth is more than that currently, if Musk spent $1 million a day, every day, $1 million a day, every day, that pile of money would last 550 years. Do the math. And so it's scary. For me, it's scary the amount of money and the power that buys that's in the hands of one man. So let's talk about the relationship of Musk with President-elect Trump, because that's really what this is about. I've read a biography of Musk, and it seems to me that if he is true to his core values, many of them are diametrically opposed to Trump, like climate change and like electric vehicles. So on the surface, I just wonder if that relationship can be long term. It's interesting that Musk seemed to win over Steve Bannon in the debate over H-1B visas. Trump was at one point against them, then he switched for them after Musk gave support. So at least in round one, Musk seemed to be more influential than a hardcore MAGA like Steve Bannon. It remains to be seen. What's my prediction? My prediction is that if there's not, and this is going to sound like a conspiracy theory, and I apologize. If nothing is happening under the table, meaning that Musk is giving in some way the Trump family or whatever some money. I hate the way that sounds, like a conspiracy theory. If there's nothing going on behind the scenes, then I think they'll part ways, because both of them vie for attention, and the bottom line is that many of the things that Musk would want are antithetical to the general notions of the MAGA base. Got to hurry up a little bit. Mass deportation. Trump has. I couldn't find a specific number that Trump suggested for mass deportation. He does throw around the number of 11 million to 20 million undocumented. So if he's going after all those, my prediction's easy. It's not going to happen in 4 years. You can't do that. So the real prediction that I'm going to make is that he's going to build. The Biden administration deported 271,500 undocumented migrants last year. Now, previous years, his numbers were way down. But this last year, 2024, that's the number. So my prediction is that Trump will build on that and maybe even get as high as 400,000 undocumented immigrants deported every year. And I'm okay if the focus is on those who are convicted felons. When you start taking an undocumented father who has 2 children and the wife is an American citizen and the children are American citizens, and he's got a job and not causing any trouble, I have problems deporting that man. There's got to be a way to allow him to move towards citizenship. So my prediction is he will increase, maybe even significantly, the number of deportations, but in his 4 years, he's not going to come anywhere near 11 million, let alone 20 million. And that brings me to another quick aside, and that's this notion of securing the border. As I said earlier, we have nearly 2,000 miles of land border between Mexico, and the Canadian border is much bigger than that. I didn't look that number up. And I also didn't look up the number of miles of coastline we have. But the idea of locking down the border of the United States is absurd. You can't do it. There's just too many miles. Now, can you increase the surveillance? Can you decrease the flow? I think you could do that. But the idea of closing the border, it's wishful thinking. So my prediction on that's really clear. The border's not going to be closed. And again, I'm going to allow for the fact that there might be fewer apprehensions or fewer undocumented immigrants who get through, but it's not going to be zero. It's not going to be zero. I do have a fear that partly through the Department of Government Efficiency, environmental regulations and medical regulations like vaccine mandates will be weakened or discarded. In a bigger picture, I have a fear that science/data-driven decisions will disappear from many agencies and from many decisions that take place. I'm not going to get into the Department of Justice very far. Obviously, my fear is that it will become an arm of President-elect Trump's retribution. My hope is that doesn't happen. One of my biggest fears is that Trump will get the opportunity to appoint 2 additional justices to the Supreme Court, which will solidify a majority for the far right for decades and allow them to make even more, in my view, radical decisions. So that brings me to the preparation part of this. I'm preparing in several different ways. I have buttons that I'm going to wear from time to time. I've put bumper stickers and stickers on my vehicle. I've started to get active in the local Democratic Party here in Ohio. I'm doing this podcast. I'll continue to post on Facebook. Monday is Martin Luther King Day. I'm going to be participating in a march for Martin Luther King Day. I'm going to volunteer where I can. So those are all things that other people can do too. I'm not patting myself on the back because of that. One thing that I'm doing that I would hope everybody would do a version of is that every 4 years, the question arises, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And for me, that's always been a rhetorical question because I don't know. I mean, I know the big picture. And I think many people, it's influenced by kind of where you are in your life. Um, but this time, I want to be able to answer that question. So I've created for myself, and the format I'm using is a spreadsheet. I've created a spreadsheet that has a small shopping list of groceries. It has gasoline and diesel prices. I've also included things like murder rate in the United States and number of mass shootings and social things that I'm interested in. And I personally have a small portfolio of stocks and mutual funds that I manage on my own. And I've listed my position there. Now, during the 4 years, I might buy and sell things, but I'll have the original position. And I'll know what they're worth on inauguration day this year. And then in 2 years or 4 years, I'll know that. So based on my spreadsheet, I'm going to be able to give a real answer in 2 years or 4 years. Are you better than you were 2 years or 4 years away? So my big hope is that, well, I guess as an American, I have to say that I hope that some aspects of President Trump's agenda are successful, but I'm fearful of many of them. My realistic hope is that in 2 years, I hope the Democrat Party will either take back the House or Senate or both. And obviously, my hope in 4 years is that the Republican Party can move more from where they are, MAGA, into the more traditional conservative party, and that the Democrat Party will have a candidate that can compete for the presidency. If you saw my short tease introduction, you know that each one of these episodes I'm going to end with a quotation. And the quotation for this is from Desmond Tutu. He writes, "Hope is being able to see that there is light despite all the darkness." For me, that's kind of where we are. I think there's a lot of darkness out there, but I think there's a lot of light. So I hope you've found this episode interesting. Stay tuned. I'll give you a heads up when the next episode is ready to launch.